forget the Insidious Six. It's more like, can we just get these last 6 episodes done? This is the Superhero Pantheon. On this podcast, we have been analyzing and reviewing the mid-90s Spider-Man animated series, and we are going to be continuing our look at the final season. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. I'm, of course, sitting here with my colleague Brian at Brian to Brain. Please leave a 4 or 5 star review on For the Real World so that people can continue to discover the great work that we are doing here. You can also get in contact with the podcast through at the Hero Pantheon on Twitter as well. Brian, you may have noticed that maybe there's a lack of enthusiasm in my voice. We're gonna kind of disregard the usual going episode by episode, and we're just gonna kind of talk about these 3 episodes as a whole, because we are continuing and then finishing this saga of 6 Forgotten Warriors, because the 6 Forgotten Warriors are not the Insidious Six, but they are a group of heroes. They are not Watchmen, but it kind of feels like they could be the Watchmen in some ways, because it's the 1940s. And just the direction that this show is taking in the final season, just how profoundly bizarre it is. It's like, we're trying to get all these villains in here. We got the Insidious Six. We got Kingpin. This, in some ways, feels like a payoff to the Kingpin storyline. But then we're also introducing, like, all of these new characters at the end. We've got, Mary Jane is barely in any of these episodes. And it just, this was a very strange series to watch, because look, there has been some inconsistent quality to the seasons. Like, you'll have one episode that's really good, then the next episode is really bad. But, like, these first 6 episodes have really taken it out of me. And it's like, I'm just at a point where I'm on autopilot, and I just want to finish the series. And it's really unfortunate, because there are some episodes of this that I really enjoy. I have no regrets about us reviewing it. But Brian, this final season is rough.
Yeah, like I said last week, it's just, they're stretching it to 65 episodes. Unfortunately, they took this turn where they wanted to do this whole backstory with World War II tied in and Captain America. I get it, man. I love crossovers. We all love crossovers in the MCU, especially with Marvel and all that stuff. But the problem is, if you really were really diehard about it, it kind of contradicts the backstory with Wolverine and Captain America when they had their crossover in X-Men. So, because they also fought the Red Skull, but Red Skull got away. So, I guess the idea is that also happened in Captain America's back history, as well as being one of these 6 Forgotten Warriors. So, because they were really tight on the continuity back in season 2 when the X-Men came over, and they really were really trying to keep that continuity together. Here, it feels like they kind of forgot about that. But then if you go back and look, I guess you can kind of piece this event after the event with Wolverine and Captain America and what they went through in that X-Men episode. So it's just kind of confusing. But, you don't notice this stuff as a kid, obviously. But the problem is, as a kid, these episodes are so boring, because I definitely don't remember these episodes as a kid. I definitely remember more so seasons 1 through 3 and 4. And a lot of these episodes just kind of just don't remember anything. I mean, it's clear why is because they're not for kids. There's a lot of espionage going on, a lot of detail going on, too much detail going on to the point where it's hard to follow who's on whose side sometimes. You know what I mean? Just like all of a sudden that Russian lady just shows up at the end of one of these episodes, and I'm like, how did she get there? So, you know what I mean? Like all kinds of shit going on, and these Forgotten Warriors, my thinking was, okay, you're introducing all these new quote unquote golden age superheroes at the end of the series. Why? Because you want to make toys, right? This whole idea about this series is to make money in toys. So as I was going through the toy line, they don't even have toys, and I'm talking about like Thunderer, Black Marvel, Destroyer, Miss America, and the Wizard. Those are the names of these forgotten heroes, and of course the other one is Captain America. But it's just like, wow, like why go through all this effort to reintroduce? I get it, like these classic Marvel, names right from the past that were around that time of World War II. I get that, but the story is not enticing enough. It's not grabbing you enough to justify introducing all these new characters and stuff. And it's cool that that there's this classic feel and that they're making old people jokes. I'm like, I'm too old for this, and I get that, but it feels out of place. You know what I mean? Like I get this strange feeling that the Black Adam movie is gonna be like this, where it's like we're gonna throw in Black Adam and mix them up with these old JSA characters and be like having all these flashbacks to the 1940s and 50s or whatever, and that's where we're gonna get and mix it in with all these different things and have too many characters on screen. And that's kind of what this kind of feels like. So, and Spider-Man's just smack in the middle of it, trying to, I guess, prove his parents' innocence. But I guess he already kind of did that. So he's kind of just, trying to take down Kingpin or whatever, and Red Skull. And Red Skull is like the center of it all and all that. And he's kind of the main villain in all this, even though Kingpin does bring the Sinister Six together. There's a lot of crazy shit going on. And not to mention the fact that, well, I guess what this is the big reveal. The big reveal of these three episodes is the fact that Chameleon is actually the stepson of Red Skull, which I guess makes sense because like they have the similar kind of like like he obviously did some tests on Chameleon and some experiments because the Chameleon is definitely a byproduct of some kind of biochemical changes in his body, obviously. So I do like that connection, and I do like how they were all connected. And
I
that
just wish
explains.
they needed to set it up better. It's like if that's what you want to do in this world where Chameleon is the son-in-law of Red Skull, like if you want to do that, that's fine. But they don't do any setup. They don't they mentioned that there was a traitor in one episode that Kingpin snaps at the beginning of one of the episodes is trying to figure it out, and it's like, and then they kind of forget about it, and then they just do this reveal seemingly out of nowhere, and it's like if you set that up like. I'm not saying you don't have to beat people over the head with it, but there are subtle ways that I think they could have set it up. But the problem is there's just too much going on. Like the first of the three episodes that we watched for this week, like the problem was there were so many flashbacks, and at a certain point, it's like this isn't even a story. This is you are just showing us a series of flashbacks, and that is not a story that takes me out of the episode. That makes me very uninterested in what the show is doing, because if you're going to get us to invest in these Forgotten Warriors, you're really, I mean, it's a real challenge anyway, because again, we're in the final season. We have a limited amount of bandwidth to go. The problem is that these characters don't have a relationship with Spider-Man. I think the thing that we have realized, or at least I have anyway, is the show is at its best when the characters, the villains, everybody involved, there is a direct connection to Spider-Man. And when the show gets away from that, then that is when it becomes problematic. And I maybe there are exceptions to that rule, but for me, just we got away from, okay, these Forgotten Warriors, they have a connection to Captain America. It kind of mirrors the Insidious Six, I guess. But I mean, the characters are okay, but they're not all that significant. Like you have a Flash knockoff. Okay, whatever. You have a walking pee joke. That's literally what he is. The Wizard is in a yellow costume. They can't, because it's a kid show, they can't say pee, but like there are definitely some allusions to the fact that this is literally just a walking piss person, I guess. And it's just, I mean, it's very 90s, so I guess from that perspective I understand it. But it was just I was very uninterested in what was going on. And it's kind of sad because again, I've enjoyed kind of going through this journey and just exploring the show and the different facets. And even look, there have been some poor episodes, but this was just boring. And there's a huge difference between bad and boring. I will watch something that's bad any day of the week. Like, to me, I would much rather watch, say, the 1990 version of Captain America as opposed to, say, the 2015 Fantastic Four, because that Fantastic Four is one of the most boring movies ever made. And Captain America's bad, but at least it's somewhat entertaining. And I think that's the difference between the two of them. And for me, this is not nearly as bad as either one of those things, but it was just I was wholly uninterested in what was going on. And Spider-Man makes this allusion. He called Kingpin a Saturday morning villain. And the thing that I kept thinking about as I was watching is, like, this has become a Saturday morning cartoon. Like, we have gotten away from, like, the horror illusions and the connective tissue to things like John Carpenter or creature features or things of that nature. And so much of the focus is on, like, these goofy superheroes that lose their powers at arbitrary points and whatnot. And that's kind of where I come down on these 3 episodes. Is just they were fundamentally uninteresting, and I'm not sure that we ended up in a better place. I mean, Mary Jane, once again, accepting the fact that Spider-Man has to do his job, is basically okay with him coming and going as he pleases. So I guess good for him for that. But yeah, these episodes were rough, man. They were just real rough.
The other thing that didn't help either was, like, the casting, and I kind of looked it up, and it wasn't the same voice of Captain America from the X-Men's crossover with Wolverine. They picked another guy, but the guy they picked was not charismatic at all. Like, this Captain America just had no charisma, and he was so boring. And it's just like, oh, okay, they missed the boat here. I don't know why he sounded so flat and, like, so cheesy. He ended up sacrificing himself twice, and I think because the way they did it, like, instead of, like, him going into the ice, him and Red Skull go into this, like, portal and disappear for like 40 years after World War II, and then they come back out of the portal and they're both back and blah blah blah. And then they ended up going back in the portal together anyway at the end. So Captain America came back and then he was gone again. So I just weird things like that. Like, man, you had Captain America come back for like a day, and then I think they even just repeated the same shot from the flashback just because they can just to reuse the animation, and they just went back in the portal. So I don't know, man, just weird stuff like that. And then some of the voices were fine. I mean, the voices were not great because, like, they pick old people obviously for these voices, but I think the one that really kind of stood out for me that sounded familiar, and you're gonna drop this on me, but I dropped it on you first. The voice of Black Marvel is Paul Winfield, and Paul Winfield, you may not recognize his name, but he is a great character actor. He's had some lead roles. He was nominated for an Oscar back in the 70s for lead acting role in Sounder. But what I remember him primarily is, like, he was the one that got that gross fucking bug put in his ear in Star Trek 2. Oh my God, that was disgusting. And then if you just see his face, you'll just recognize him from all kinds of stuff. He was a voice on Gargoyles as well. So I know you're a fan of his, I guess, because you've seen a lot of his. I mean, if you look at his wiki, like, you've seen a lot of his stuff, like going back to even the 60s. He was doing TV appearances on Man from Uncle.
He was in the Terminator as the police chief.
That's right. Oh, that's right. He died in like 5 minutes.
That was the role. He was also hilarious in Mars Attacks. I think that's probably where I remember seeing him first, is in that movie. He's very, very good in that movie. And yeah, he's a very good actor. And yeah, I think the way that he voiced Omar Mosley / Black Marvel, like, that was kind of a nice touch. Like, I appreciated what they were trying to do there, but, like, I think in the big picture, this just came across like a real anticlimax to not only this story, but also to the Insidious Six as well. And yeah, it's just, this is going to be a really short episode because I don't have a lot to say about these 3 episodes. And I think for us to go, like, episode by episode and really just break it down, there really isn't a lot to it. Do you agree with me that the way that the times that they lost their powers were just very arbitrary?
Like, random as fuck, and all of a sudden they have their powers back randomly? I thought that whole idea was, I don't know, like, they should have just not have powers anymore. Like, the idea is that they got the super soldier serum, but not the full 100% dose that, Captain America got, so their powers are fading. But if their powers are fading, by the time they get old, they should have no powers whatsoever, right? So it was just weird that they would like
See,
kind of
but they
throw
have
that in.
rings. They have rings where they can control their powers, which is also
Oh, right.
just
That was the stupid part too, because I was like, what does a ring have to do with their physical innate powers? You know what I mean? It was just like, okay, they're trying to get cute. They're trying to get like Captain or Captain Planet-ish or whatever, and I get that. Kids kind of like can interpret that, in their head, but at the same time, it made no sense. It made no sense. That'd be like if Spider-Man all of a sudden can control his powers and put it in a ring and then lose his powers, become human whenever he wants to. It's like, I thought it was just stupid. And then when, like, I kind of just ignored that part of it, because you knew by the time in the final fight at the end of the 3 episodes, like, someone was going to lose their powers temporarily and someone was going to get their powers back temporarily at the right time, and it was just going to be the right kind of timing, and that's exactly what happened. But I would have just had them with the no powers and just let them be human, and speed, like, because they did have some interesting like lines. It was like one of the lines that the doctor gave was like, I would give anything to be a hero again because it was the greatest feeling of my life. And I was like, oh, that's some, it's a good line right there. And then you kind of see that kind of play out a little bit in the final fight. But I wish they would just had no powers and just rely on their human instincts. I think that would have been far more interesting and an interesting story to tell about these old people that were heroes that don't have their powers anymore, that are trying to still stop the Red Skull because they're so determined to like defeat evil. Like, that's a story to tell. But because of that mixed up powers thing, it was just kind of like, okay, I get what they're going. Someone's going to use their powers at the right moment and get the job done, and that's what happened. So very cliche, but I don't know. It just feels like I'm starting to notice a pattern too. Is like these episodes that are written by John Semper. He was kind of the one that had like a lot of those first season standalone episodes that introduced a lot of the villains. But I think at this point, the ones that are not co-written or fully written by women have become the least interesting episodes later on in the seasons. So I don't know if that's just like a pattern I'm noticing now, and it's true or not, but I'm just noticing the name John Semper appear in a lot of these episodes that we're kind of frowning upon later on. So I think what this is saying, that like we definitely missed the co-writers from the female perspective of like Meg McLaughlin, who co-wrote a lot of the season 4 stuff with my girl, Black Cat. So you never know. I think that's part of it too.
undoubtedly, and maybe there are budgetary issues. They didn't have as many writers. They couldn't put their full energy into the series as much. So there's any number of things that could have happened to where this just wasn't going to work. And for me, it's just really unfortunate because I think there was potential in a final season and kind of wrapping this all up. Like, I think having a payoff to the Kingpin storyline, like, I think that makes a lot of sense. But it does not appear that we're gonna really get a satisfying one. We are, however, next week we are going to be talking about the Hydra Man, the return of the Hydra Man as he is coming back. And Brian, I propose that we also do the 3-part Secret Wars. So we're going to discuss 5 episodes next week because the final week is a 2-parter, and I really just want us to be able to both discuss those episodes and kind of do a final wrap-up of the series. So next week, Return of the Hydra Man, that 2-parter, which I don't think we're going to discuss for very long because my feelings on Hydra Man are very similar to the Scorpion, but also Secret Wars should give us something to sink our teeth into because at least we're going to have some characters. We're going to have the return of some heroes that we actually know who they are.
Yeah, and in case you've been wondering, folks, I've been kind of alluding to what happens to Mary Jane, and it's all coming down to Hydra Man next week, and it's God, no spoilers, but go watch it and just reliving it now, man. It's like, god damn, what a finale for Mary Jane, huh? God dang it. But we'll talk about that next week because it's one of those unsettling things that was never really resolved from my childhood. So.
All right. So for Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening to this very short episode. We will talk to you again next week.
So here's my official list of porn parody titles for The Wiz. The Wiz, The Wizard, Wizard of Oz, Wizard of Gore, Muppet Wizard of Oz, and Wizards. But of course, it's all related to P, so there you go.